Hello and welcome to my podcast, Used to Be's Do Count, with me, Dean James. You're listening to Season 2, Episode 10, I Used to Be a Professional Athlete. In this episode, I speak with Michael Bugary, an ex-professional baseball player who played for the Boston Red Sox. He tells me all about an injury that took him out early on in his career and how he coped with life without baseball. Trigger warning here, guys, this episode does explore themes around addiction, drug misuse and abuse, alcohol misuse and depression. Michael speaks so openly to me about years of battling his addiction with opioids, as well as misuse of alcohol and other drugs. Wasn't just about stopping baseball, it was about not being Michael anymore. So how did you cope with that then?
Yeah, I didn't really, so like I said, I had made baseball so tied to my sense of self-worth around that, so I didn't cope with it well. I isolated, I was depressed, and I found painkillers, opiates that work the best for me,
So what does an athlete do when they can no longer play their sport? Well, Michael speaks so openly to me about how he's rebuilt his life, battled with addiction, overcome a cancerous brain tumour, and is now living in his truth, his power as an inspirational public speaker and an author. If you or anyone that you know is in need of any help and support on any of the topics raised in this episode, please go into the show notes where you'll find some very useful links that might just help. Are you ready to hear this incredibly inspiring story of transformation and acceptance? Well, without further ado, let's dive right in. Okay, Michael Bugary, thank you so much for joining my podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today, Michael. For anyone out there who doesn't know who you are, let everyone know. Who are you? Where are you in the world? And what are you up to right now?
Yeah, so my name is Michael Bugary. I'm in Northeast Ohio in the United States. And yeah, I'm a motivational speaker and an author. I have a book coming out.
I'm very excited about this book coming out. I'm very excited to talk to you about all of the work you're doing and the book that is on the horizon for sure. As you know, though, this is called Used to Be's Do Count. So we're going to focus a lot of the conversations today on your used to be. So tell everyone what your used to be was.
Well, I used to be a professional baseball player.
Amazing. You used to be a professional baseball player. This is an incredible story that you have, which is why your motivational speaking is so incredible now. So much rich life experience, and I can't wait to delve into it. If anyone's listening in the States, in the US, they're going to know a lot about baseball. It's like one of the major sports. Us in the UK, we don't know so much. And I've got a lot of listeners around Europe as well, some in Australia. Baseball is there, it's prominent. We know, we see it, but we don't watch it every day. What I would really like to do, Michael, is just understand, how does one even become a professional baseball player in the States? Start me off on your journey of like being a youngster, being into baseball, and how you become a professional.
Yeah, so well, that's funny because I actually did play baseball a couple times in Australia.
Oh, really?
But yeah, so
Okay.
I got the idea of having to explain it a little bit. But yeah, I think it started for me where I felt different when I was younger. I didn't feel like I necessarily always fit in, but I also had this inherent belief that I was special and I was meant for greatness. Not that I knew what that greatness was. That's why I called the disease of me, because I had that belief. But but I really just wanted the validation and attention that came from greatness, right? And I didn't know how to do any of the work. And when I started playing baseball, I thought I found what I was looking for in that sense. And I played the other sports, but I was a little chubby kid, and I was slow, so I never got to play like the positions that I wanted to. I just wanted the ball, right? That's all. I just wanted that. And so with baseball, though, I could play the position that I wanted to. Being left-handed in baseball is an advantage, and I was left-handed, so it was almost like as a pitcher, I was almost like it was meant to be for me. And so, I just immersed myself in it. I just loved it, and I watched all my favorite pros, and I studied the art of it, and then I started to take it a little more seriously, and I started to go into academies and things where you get lessons from ex-pros, like I think a lot of sports do, and I started to show. At the end, when I got to high school, it evolved into like a kid's love for a game, but it became kind of my identity now, right? Because it was the source of getting the things that I wanted. Because I quickly learned that the better I performed on the field, the more of that attention and validation I got.
Yeah, sure. And I love the fact that you said that you did believe that you were destined for greatness, but you didn't really know what it entailed work-wise? Like you weren't really into work. By the time you were in high school, did you start to understand the level of work that you needed to do to make this happen for you?
Yeah, I don't know if it was if I thought that baseball was a thing that was going to be to make me great. I thought it was my fastest way to be great at it, you know, like that. I thought that was my fastest way to greatness. And yes, I started to understand that when I started then to be at that academy around all the other better players in the county, and just, you know, around better competition, you start to size yourself up and see some of the things that you need to do. And in order for me to get to the next level and to get to all that attention that I wanted to, I had to get better.
And the attention you're talking about is popularity, right? You're a teenager, you're a young adult. Popularity with the lads, as we say, the boys. Popularity with the girls as well, I'm sure. So baseball gave you
Absolutely.
all of that, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I had a point in my childhood, I think, where in college I had, you know, a coach tell me that I wasn't good enough, basically, and I think I made a promise to myself at that point that I didn't care what you said to me. Nobody was ever going to tell me that I wasn't good enough again, and I took that motivation, and I took that motivation to really it sparked me, and I practiced and I practiced and I practiced, and then baseball kind of became my identity, and it became that. And there's a pattern in my life of trying to prove people wrong, and it's fun.
I think that is relatable for a lot of people. It takes a lot of strength of character, and sometimes it takes, well, people say, right, it takes the haters to make it great. Like,
Yeah,
cannot be great without the hate, because the haters are the people that you're proving wrong. And I guess you learn that at a young age for sure. You already said at this point, even as a young person in high school, baseball became all encompassing. It became your identity. So everyone kind of knew Michael was the baseball player. Michael was the base. Was there any other part of you that you were putting out there, or no? You were just the.
at first there was like I did all kinds of things like Boy Scouts, and my parents were really supportive, and they put me in all different kind of things, like we went to church and all these other things. But then when I started playing baseball, it became everything. You know, I played it all year round. You know, living in California, you know, the weather's good all year, so you can play outside all year. So I play for all these different travel teams, and then it became on the weekends. You know, we're always playing for this and that, and it just became all consuming. And I think my problem was too is that with this new identity, I could only have it on the field, but I needed it off the field too, right? Because like I said, it is that attention, but it's also that infamy too. Like I didn't care if you liked me or hated me. I just wanted you to know me.
I think it's really interesting because if you're a baseball player and that becomes your identity when you're playing baseball, perfectly fine. You know what you're doing. You're good at it. You're experienced. You're playing it day in, day out, 7 days a week. Actually, all seasons, because you're in California, is actually when you step off the field that you take that identity with you, but you're not playing baseball. So who are you when you're not playing baseball? But we're going to get to that actually, because I think that's a really, really important point. However, I just want to understand then from high school into college and into, well, first of all, I haven't asked you. I already know. What team did you play for?
I played for the University of California, Berkeley, and then I was drafted by the Boston Red Sox organization.
Yeah. So you played for the Boston Red Sox. Amazing. So tell me a little bit about being in college and then being drafted by the Red Sox. How did that happen?
Yeah, so you know, like I said, when I started playing year round, I started playing at better competitions, and then you get more exposure when you're at showcases and things. And I started to get all these letters from different colleges, and I finally settled on the University of California, Berkeley, because it was relatively close to home. You know, my parents could come see me play. It was one of the best conferences for college baseball, and where a lot of scouts would see me play. And I had pride in North. I was from Northern California, so I had pride, and it's one of the big schools in Northern California. And so, you know, I got hurt my first couple of years, but the beauty at it being a big program like that is that you have other really good players too with you. So you have a lot of scouts at practices and at games. And when I made my comeback my junior year, my third year in school, you know, I was pitching really well, but the scouts weren't there to see me necessarily. They were there to see somebody else. But because they were there, they saw me too. And I think all that stuff started happening again. And then eventually I had a good third year, and then I was drafted to play for them, the Red Sox.
Amazing. It's just proof as well that you need to be in the right place at the right time with the right people. And I think for any athlete, for any sport, any athlete, and also for artists, like I think dancers, actors, people that train, anything where that you train from a very young age. It's like your passion, it's your life, it's your identity, and then you're looking to make that a career. Immersing yourself around super talented people pushes you further. Making sure that you're in a space where coaches, mentors, and scouts are going to see you. It matters, right? You were in that place.
Yeah, yeah, no, it absolutely matters, and I think when you're around the peer people that are, the peers that are equally as talented, and it takes your game to another level, and the things that you do off the field, it holds you accountable. And that's the one thing I miss most about playing, is that having those type of guys around me that are just highly motivated, and that are willing to tell you the things that you always don't want to hear, but it's the truth, and
Yeah.
I just miss that. I miss that camaraderie the most.
Yeah, that's great actually, having that camaraderie. You don't really understand that until you've had that level of camaraderie. It doesn't really happen in the real world. It only kind of happens in sports. And again, I think because I used to be a dancer a long time ago, in that kind of arts world as well, the performing arts, it happens as well.
Yeah.
Um, what position did you play?
So I played first base and pitcher when I got to college, but after a couple of injuries, I decided to settle on being a pitcher. So, the guy with the ball, right, being in control of it, and that always fit my narrative mostly of my life. That's what I wanted to be, because when I'm in control, the game starts and stops with me. I everything, all eyes are on me, and I really love that. And as it developed, I evolved into what is called a relief pitcher, or a closing pitcher. Is a pitcher that comes in later in the game to relieve the starting pitcher. And typically, my role became the pitcher that comes in the most important part of the game. In a high stress situation where the game's on the line, and I love that. I love.
So you thrive, you're in control, and you thrive under pressure.
Yeah, I mean, not always, but I wanted to try to. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, I just really liked it.
But you backed yourself. You backed yourself, and I love that. You had a strength of confidence. You had a confidence, and you had a strength of character, and you backed yourself, and that is really important. I mean, you're not gonna succeed in a sport like that unless you really back yourself. So I love hearing that. Did you have mentors? Did you have like a bunch of people that were really important role models that you looked up to and helped you and took you under their wing? Was there one person? Was there a bunch of people? How was that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had, uh, professional coaches that taught me lessons, growing up, and they got me into, taking my game to the next level. And some of them followed me through into college, and and later it fizzled out when I got hurt, and we'll get into that later. But yeah, those are the people that were around me through that. And I think it's a tricky question, especially too when I talk to athletes and I'm speaking now, is a lot of times a lot of people don't have your best interests at heart, right? Because a lot of them are riding your ship, right? The tide rises all ships. And I think sometimes, and especially it happened for me too, when I found myself in a situation of desperation, they weren't. I sought to them for advice, and for things that I should have done, and that they didn't really have my best interest at heart. I think the biggest mentor, the one that I really didn't follow, was my dad. I I treated my other coaches like father figures, because but my dad just didn't play baseball, and all I cared about was baseball, right? Even though I had this great dad that was always there, fortunately I'm able to mend that now and still seek that. But yeah, no, I did it and I didn't. So in terms of baseball, yeah, I always had people there to support me, but off the field, not so much.
But on the baseball front, and like you said, a tide raises all ships, almost kind of riding the coattails, or they're there with an ulterior motive that is absolutely backing you and mentoring you in this sport, but not necessarily as a person, right? If
Yeah,
if it hits the fan, are they going to be there? And actually, no. And your dad is someone that's going to be there through thick and thin, but because he doesn't have that baseball background, it's like at that time you need the baseball people that you're looking at. It's I think this is so common as well. Like this is so
yeah,
common in these things where you're looking to people as mentors, as role models that don't always necessarily holistically fully have
yeah.
your back, right? There's an
Yeah,
ulterior
and
motive.
I think too, though, like, and I think, like, some of my coaches that got really close with me in particular, I think they thought that they had my back. I think they believe that, but that when that relationship is established, my parents are paying them a ton of money, right? So that relationship was built on is transactional, right from the very beginning. And even though we spent a decade together, and they watched me grow and to go on into these things, and I think they felt like they built that relation. And I don't think their intentions were wrong to a sense in some ways. But what happens is then it gets into a real life where you have to make decisions beyond baseball, beyond things that affect you in the future. And I think I turned to them for those things, and I got some bad advice in some ways, and we'll get into that.
There's a limit to their love, essentially.
Yeah,
And we'll
yeah,
get into
exactly.
that,
Yeah.
because then what happens next? So you actually get drafted for the Red Sox, and tell me a little bit about your experience with the Red Sox and how long did that last?
Yeah, so it'll typically about 3 seasons really. I really only had one good season my rookie year, and I pitched pretty well. And I think when I got there, I didn't realize that I wasn't just no longer a member of a team anymore, right? I was an employee. I was an investment. I was part of an organization, and where all my actions and behaviors are scrutinized on and off the field,
So
right?
baseball as a passion, as an outlet, as something that made you popular, something that shaped your identity, now becomes a business. You see the business behind it.
Yeah, and I didn't really see the business behind it, but that's why, because for me it was never about the love for the game diminished a long time ago. It became an addiction for me, really, because it was a source of getting the things that I needed, in a sense, right? So it was just part of me. And like I said, I didn't love what I loved competing. I loved being in those moments and competing, but I didn't really invest into it like it was going to be a career. You know what I mean? I did things in my behaviors that were contradictory to that.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, and you've got that clearly reflective vision now, where you've got an addictive personality, and baseball at that time was your outlet.
Yeah.
You said you did around only 3 seasons. Really, is not a long time, and there's
No.
a reason for that. So what happened?
Yeah.
Tell
So
me what happened.
my second year in spring training, which is like the preseason, I threw a pitch and I felt my arm pop, and which basically I just fractured my elbow and splintered, and it was ended up being an unsuccessful surgery. And so, and after I came back the following third season, my arm just wasn't right anymore, and it was clear that I wasn't the guy that they drafted, right? I wasn't the same person, and so then I was released, and I went home, and I tried to get all these tests done, and got second opinions, and it turned out that the ultimate conclusion was that I was never going to be able to throw right again.
Wow. So essentially, it was, I'm going to say, just a fracture. Fractures, they don't come
Yeah.
in all shapes and sizes. Some are more serious than others, but it was a fracture. The problem was that the surgery and the recovery was not good. So it meant that you're going to have a long-term defect, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man. That's
There's a
hard
couple
to
of reasons.
swallow. That's really hard to swallow. How are you feeling at the time? I mean, did you accept that you were not going to be playing baseball like you did again at that level again? Did you accept that straight away, or was that difficult to accept?
No, not at all. I didn't accept it at all. I was 23 years old, and I had this mindset where, I was willing to die at 40 to play 10 years in the major leagues. Like baseball was everything to me, and I didn't even think about a life after it, let alone for it to end even before it began, right? So yeah, so I didn't, I didn't. I held everything in, and that's when I, turned to my solution of painkillers to kind of numb my feelings.
I'm going to ask. I mean, this all-encompassing identity, right? Baseball is not just a sport. You're not just an athlete. It is part of you. It is you.
Yeah.
Michael is a baseball player, and baseball is so wrapped up in your identity. So that injury that took you out wasn't just about stopping baseball. It was about not being Michael anymore. That is something that you can't see. I mean, we at all ages probably will struggle to see that, but at 23 as well. I mean, wow. So how did you cope with that then?
Yeah, I didn't really, so like you said, I had made baseball so tied to my sense of self-worth. Like my performance was associated with my self-esteem, right? So my identity was so one-dimensional, right? It was so around that. So I didn't cope with it well. I isolated, I was depressed, and I found painkillers, opiates that worked the best for me. You know, I wanted to numb my feelings and I wanted to be alone and I didn't want to think about anything. And at the time, Oxycontin, that type of drug, just it works, and that's what I did. That was my solution.
Yeah, this is a numbing of physical pain, and then of course all of the emotional pain, the mental health stuff as well. And we've seen now, because there's been so much media attention around it, Netflix documentaries, movies, news reports, but at the time there wasn't that. So you wasn't really aware that Oxycontin was as dangerous as it was, as addictive as it was. And just to understand, it was easily available for you. How did you get hold of it?
Yeah, it was. I'd like to put a little fancy ribbon on my story, right, and make it sound good. Where I was this promising, a young, talented athlete with a bright future that suffered this devastating injury, that had an unsuccessful surgery and was given painkillers, and that's why he became an addict. But that's, and as great as that sounds, it's a great narrative, right? And a narrative where I'm the victim, and I like to think that, but it's not true. Like throughout baseball, there's substance abuse in there too, and I was always managed to control it with when I had baseball in my life, because baseball was my higher power. I was always getting drug tested and things, but I experimented with opiates before. I tried OxyContin in the past. I knew exactly what it was going to do to me. Right. So originally I started getting it from doctors, and I learned how to doctor shop and explain to them, hey, my elbow, I played for the Red Sox, or I went to school here, like I'm this good guy, but here's what I need. And it worked for a little while, and then eventually, the addiction progresses and I need more and more and more. And so I started getting it off the street, and I was really reluctant to back in my hometown buy drugs, so I didn't want anybody to see me or get to know me for that. So I had like middlemen and people around to help me acquire it. So
Yeah, okay. So you learned a solution to the problem early on, whether that was opioids, whether that was alcohol an issue for you as well?
alcohol is always associated to me with like happy times, right? Because I use alcohol to keep up my character off the field, right? Because I knew how to be like fearless. I knew how to be um I knew how to be just confident. I knew how to be all those things on the field, right? I knew how to do that, but off the field, I didn't know how to talk to girls or to keep up this character. I didn't know how to do any of that, and that's where alcohol came in at an early age for me to do that, to keep up that identity off the field, because it didn't help me on the field at all. And so, yeah, before my year that I was drafted, I got introduced to Adderall, which is a prescription amphetamine, right? That's typically or prescribed to those to those with ADHD, right? That need focus, and I always had that racing mind. I was diagnosed with ADHD at a young age, so I used it to justify it, and I had that was almost became my secret weapon because it helped me on the field too, and as well as off the field. And when I took it, I didn't feel like I didn't have to drink anymore because I could still be that person. I was smarter and more focused.
Yes, okay. So you found Adderall was the replacement for alcohol and allowed you to be that person off the field as well. Knowing what you know now, I mean, this is a bit of a silly question, but I'm going to ask it. Right. Knowing what you know now, how would you have approached those drugs differently?
Yeah, and it's a good question, and I think I have to view it from a couple different lenses. If I wanted to continue my baseball career and be the successful baseball player, that I would look at it differently. But now, as this person that realizes that baseball wasn't the thing I was meant to do, it was just something that I did, and I'm grateful that I went through those experiences, because you know, and I think as addicts we have this unique chance for redemption, in the sense that that those substances take you to hell. They take you to this place where you don't think your mind can go. It takes you to do things that you never thought you would do. And I think when you get to that place and you're able to crawl your way out of it, you learn so many new things, and you learn so many things about yourself. So in that sense, I wouldn't change anything. But what I would do is I would, but it did hurt a lot of people. I hurt a lot of people around me. And when I speak to young kids and athletes, I tell them, like, hey, I can't ever tell you not to drink, or whatever, because I can't, because I'd be a hypocrite. But what I can say is that all it ever did was make me act like an idiot, and it ruined every single meaningful relationship I ever had in my life. So there's a part of me that wants to say, hey, I would avoid all those things. There's also a part of me that doesn't want to change that experience.
Yeah. I mean, this is why I love doing this podcast. And this is why I love talking to people like you, because it's about looking back and reflecting on something like that and knowing that is generally what's making me so great today. You know, going through all of that and digging yourself out of that dark place is what's making you so great, so unique, so incredible at what you do today. So, of course, it's not about regrets. I think with regards to the prescription drugs and how readily available they are,
Yeah.
how easily prescribed they are, and then you
Yeah.
have this street level as well, where you can access it on the street illegally as well as legally through doctors. It's about educating young people to understand how risky it is, because sometimes they look at prescription drugs completely differently to how they look
Yeah.
at controlled uh, controlled drugs, you know, like illegal drugs like cocaine or um, crystal meth or stuff like that. Bad stuff. And we know that. And these are street drugs, but actually, Oxycontin, Adderall, they can have really adverse effects because they are drugs just as bad.
Yeah.
And they are highly addictive as well. For someone like you, you're reflecting so well now on the fact that you just had an addictive personality. Your outlet was baseball.
Yeah.
Off the pitch, it was these other things, but addiction was kind of there running uh,
Yeah.
along your life for quite some time.
Yeah, and you made a great point. You know, there's the stigma behind certain things, right? The certain drugs versus the other things, and I found it early on when I was sharing my story. I think sometimes it's hard for me to say that I eventually graduated to heroin, right? Because I think when you think of heroin, you think a guy sticking needles in his arm in a trap house somewhere, which in a lot of cases is it. I don't no means to judge, but I smoked it though, so I mean like smoking it off tinfoil is any better, right? You know what I mean? But this I think we tell ourselves or we tell ourselves in our mind. But that's true, and same thing with Adderall, and I've tried methamphetamine before too. But I would have much rather personally taken Adderall and OxyContin. They're just as strong for me, and they worked in the same way. The issue was that they stopped making OxyContin in the form that you can abuse, right? So what do you do when you can't have no more access to that drug? Is that you find something like heroin that's cheaper and better, right? It doesn't solve the problem. You just go on to something else. And the same thing with Adderall. What do I do when I can't have access to this thing anymore? And so while I found it was easy for me to manipulate doctors and do things to get more of it, but then it was also became a little bit easier too to acquire it on the street as well, especially when there's no availability of it.
Yeah, yeah. This is the complexity of addiction, and this is why it's so important that people like you are so open about it as well. So open and to talk about it, just so that some people out there can be educated, because it is really about education. And there's always a moment, isn't there? There's always a moment of doubt in your mind where you go, should I, shouldn't I? There's always a thing where you can potentially pull yourself back from the cliff edge. You know, depending on people's situations, it's possible to pull yourself back from the cliff edge, but someone out there can hear your story and maybe do that for themselves. And that's why it's so important. You wasn't just dealing with this injury, this bad recovery of an injury, and the fact that baseball was leaving your life through this addiction. You actually dealt with something even worse than that. What happened after that?
So yeah, after once I said like once heroin starts to enter your life, like a drug like that, you lose the ability to keep up to appearances anymore. Because for so long, I managed to hold on to a little bit of my identity I had left from my coaching or teaching lessons, and so I was able to do that to kind of feed my addiction. I still had these things, like so I was this guy on the outside, not practicing at all what I preach, right?
Yeah, but dipping your toe in the sport
Yeah,
that
yeah,
kept that
yeah,
part
yeah.
of
It's
your
holding on to
identity.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was miserable because I couldn't be it in the way that I wanted to. So I think finally my family started to take notice, and I went to treatment and it's in Arizona, and I decided to when I got but when I went into treatment, I was trying to compare myself out of it, right? I was this professional baseball player, and I'm not some druggie from the street. I would tell myself, and I was always looking for the differences, not the similarities, and I learned to say the things that I had to say to get people off my back, but I was never really honest, right? And so when I got out, I decided to stay in Arizona and to live this different new life where I would try to forget about baseball, but I never came to terms with it, and I started doing personal training and other things, and I found some. I didn't do what was suggested of me, so I started to quickly live the way that I once was, and I think I found I got in some a little bit of legal trouble, and I started dating a new girl, and I found some motivation in that, and. And so I started to get myself clean, and my life started to get a little better. Then I started to experience these headaches out of nowhere, were headaches that were so debilitating that I couldn't ignore, that I wasn't able to wake up in the morning and I was nodding off, during the day. And I think my girlfriend thought that I was on drugs at the time, and rightfully so. I think that she thought, I relapsed. And so we got into a little tiff, I think, as you guys would say, right?
Yeah, it's a very English term.
An
Yeah.
argument. See what I'm trying to do there? An argument one day, and she dropped me off at the emergency room, and I went in. And when you go to the emergency room complaining about, the symptoms that I had, they get you in there pretty quick and take it seriously. And when I got out, I learned that I had a malignant brain tumor called a medulloblastoma, the size of a lacrosse ball, or slightly smaller than a tennis ball, in my cerebellum, which is the back part of your brain that controls voluntary movement.
Wow. I mean, talk about life throwing another curveball. You've kind of just got yourself clean, back on track, a girlfriend, a steady girlfriend, supportive, kind of starting to build a new life for yourself. I guess at that point, before that diagnosis of the tumor, the brain cancer, did you start to have more of a positive outlook? Did you start to feel more hopeful?
No, no, not really. I think I still had this internal battle going on, right? Of knowing that my arm probably wouldn't come back, but just not willing to accept a life without it. I would just go through these cycles where I would find some motivation to get better, and then get hurt again, and then go back into binging. And it was just, so it was, I was just holding on. I was surviving. I wasn't living. Even though I had this great, all these great new things and new things in my life, I was still hollow on the inside, because I didn't have any spirituality. I didn't have any. I wasn't being of service to others. I was in living in a life of me. And so no. And I think, like, brain cancer was the gift, I say now, because it was the only thing that was able to pull me out of that.
Really? Okay. Okay. So I understand a little bit of your state of mind and emotional state when you got the
Yeah.
diagnosis a bit better then. So then you get the diagnosis and then what happened? So what did the doctors actually say to you?
Yeah. So I think I remember one of the most vivid memories I have of all that time, because everything was happening so fast. So my mom had come down, right from California, and I remember we're in the hospital room, and she's sitting next to me, and the doctor's has his whiteboard, and he's writing talking about medulloblastomas and glioblastomas and all these different medical terms that I have no idea what. I'm just like sitting there like, yeah, yeah, whatever, buddy. And he's writing all the percentages of the treatments and the surgeries and all this stuff, and the percentages aren't very good, right? They're not. And I say this is, I never really once turned to my mom to, like, wonder what she was going through, or like what she must be experiencing. She just got me into treatment, and now I've turned into, I was this promising young son. Now I'm just like family pariah and addiction and all these things. And then I have brain cancer on top of it. And so I remember just thinking, hey, I'm going to get through this, because at least they're going to give me some good drugs now in the hospital. Right. And that was my mindset. I was indifferent. I wasn't like, oh no, I'm praying to God to keep me alive. I didn't, at that point, I didn't care, because I still didn't accept, I didn't have any closure with baseball. I didn't care if I lived or died. You know, Baseball gave me some resiliency, and it gave me an ego that I was never in the position to want to do it myself. And I don't mean to minimize suicidal ideation. It's serious. But I never would put myself in that position, because I felt like I was too important, that the world, even if I'm nearly homeless, smoking drugs on tinfoil, I still thought the world was worse without me. I believe that. And
But that was, I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about, because at some point that kept you alive. That self-belief remained in you, that self-importance, whether you want to call it ego, whether you want to call it strength of character, self-belief, confidence, whatever it is, there's some inner confidence there that kept you alive. So even though you were, in many people's cases, at rock bottom, and they would be having suicidal thoughts and suicidal ideologies,
yeah,
ideation.
ideation, there you go. Yeah, yeah.
You wasn't. You wasn't, because you believed in yourself even at that low moment. And I think potentially, did you have that before the sport? The sport gave you that, right? The sport
Yeah,
gave.
absolutely. And yeah, and we can talk about later on, when I get through all this. When I change my perspective, I can see not what I lost, but what I gained. right? So I gained so much from baseball, right? I gained that resiliency, that confidence, right? And when I learned to apply those things into another domain of my life, like in speaking now, or in anything that I do, whatever domain that may be, right? That when I see that I gained it and I learned to apply those skills, then my life completely changes, and then I'm grateful for what happened to me. I'm not dwelling on the regrets. I'm grateful for all the things,
Yeah,
and so
this is the power of coming out of a victim state, right? And not being a
yeah,
victim. And you said it yourself
yeah.
earlier. It's like I don't want to pretend that I'm the victim here. You already see that. It's so strong, so powerful. How did you get through this tumor? How did you get through and recover the brain cancer? How long did that take? Who was around you? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so I had just recently bought a place with my girlfriend. We had a new place, and unfortunately, we had an extra room, so my parents could come and they still both worked full time, so they could come and live with us and rotate. So I had that support of my family, you know, and so just on a side note, that's why I call my books called The Disease of Me, because when I think about my addiction, I can't really think of it as a disease, because it kind of and I know it is. I know there's all this science behind it, and studies and research about brain chemistry. I get that. I don't want to minimize that either, but I can't look at it like that, because it's often compared like, hey, cancer, if somebody had cancer, or to comparing to an addict, right? Addiction and cancer are both diseases. No, cancer is because, addiction tore my family apart, and cancer brought it together. Right. I wasn't robbing people to get more chemotherapy. You know what I mean? So I have to separate that for me, and that I'm the disease. But going forward to the cancer part, I had to have multiple surgeries, brain surgeries. Time in the hospital, I think I spent 7 days in the ICU. There was some procedures that I had to have that weren't particularly enjoyable, and but I was on heavy medication, so like in my mind, I could face all this acute pain. You can drill into my head, you can do whatever you want to me, just give me some good drugs, I don't care. That was my mindset. And then so I had to have a couple of months of chemotherapy and radiation, and the type of tumor that I had was so rare, they had to give me some really nasty strong stuff, and they had to build a special cage for my head, the custom fit, so it would bolt my head down, so the radiation wouldn't blast, so my head wouldn't move while the radiation blasted the back of my skull. I remember like biting, clenching my teeth, as it seemed like for hours, as was frying my head, and it would go into my teeth, and I remember like tasting metal for a year, and eventually all my hair fell out. I had lost like well over 50 pounds or 60 pounds or whatever, and I had this yellow tint to the skin of my eyes, like I was a shell of myself. I didn't look well, and you think, I think to most people, you go through that and it would change you, right? And just, not for me, but just for 2 weeks after I learned I was in remission, after my treatment was done, my mom finds me passed out in my car with drug paraphernalia on my lap. So how I handled that, I didn't. I went back to the only solution that I knew. I was actually in physical pain now. So my only solution that I knew that worked for me was opiates. And so I went to my dealer, and got more. 'Cause-
Wow, but this is such a I've gone cold. I mean, it's such a harrowing experience what you went through. Even the treatment for this cancer was so harrowing. Um, but it was the physical pain that you were treating, right? Were you really aware at the time that there was a huge amount of emotional trauma, maybe some mental health issues? You were just like patching up the physical pain with these opioids. Is that right? Or you were aware that there was some.
Both. I think acutely at that immediate time after, it was more for my physical pain. But I think when the side effects started to kick in of the treatment, I think that's when it started to become the mental side of it, because I had this, the side effects weren't really an emphasis. They didn't really think about. They're just trying to save my life. They didn't know what was going to happen to me. My tumor, like I said, was so rare. It happens mostly in children and very rarely in adults. So I didn't have any points of reference. There wasn't anybody that was 27 years old, a former athlete, that had this type of tumor that was going through these type of side effects. There's nobody. And so I had this intense nerve damage. It started in my. It's hard to explain, but it started in my head, like this buzzing where the tumor used to be, and that it would trickle down through my whole body, and it would accumulate at my nerve endings. So like if I clenched my fist, or if I clenched my toes, it would give me massive headaches. But I also had no feeling on my toes, really. So I mean, not I had feeling in my toes, but not in individual each toe. And also they're very hypersensitive, so it felt like I had pins and needles being shoved into my where my toes were. And so peripheral neuropathy in a sense, but I think it was a little bit different than that too. And so also like my front shin muscle, the muscle that's it's how you walk and sport, it was completely numb. So I had trouble walking. I had no spatial awareness. And I think once and they told me that, hey, I could possibly never have children again. I'd be sterile, and I don't know that now, but still, all that coming to me at once, that this might be my new reality. Never knowing if my body will functionally again, never knowing if I could be with a woman again, never just all that uncertainty. Then it started to weigh on me with the physical pain, and that's kind of why I stayed for the next few years. I stayed in that self pity and self medicating and isolation.
Yeah, I mean, completely understandable. What you're talking about is an immense amount of pain. A feeling every day of pain. You're talking about your entire body. Your fingers, your toes, your periphery, difficult walking. They're saying it's affecting your sexual organs. You can taste metal in your mouth. I mean, this is all encompassing. This is more than most people can deal with. How long did that go on for? How long did you experience that for?
Well, I still experience a lot of it now. I've learned to heal most of it. And I think managing my pain is a big part of my story because when I'm in pain, I only think about me. I don't think about anybody else. So I found, and like I said earlier, I had to turn back to some of the skills that baseball gave me. The exercise training, the physiology understanding, and I worked my way through that. But it took me a long time to get to that point. So it wasn't getting any better, and I had some turning points in my life where I think there's a couple types of turning points, right? I think there's turning points where it plants a seed in you, and you take that into the future. I think going to treatment was a big one for me, like that. But there's also a few turning points that like instantly change you, right? Instantly change your behavior. And one of them is the introduction of my therapy dog. He helped me inspire to change. But another one is I got to this point where in self-medicating, I got to like a limbo of agony that I call it, where I was in so much pain that I couldn't sit still, and it hurt too much to move. And I just got to a literal point where I either had to roll over and die, right? Or I had to do something different.
That's a moment of realization. Just for me to understand, Michael, how old were you when you got the diagnosis of the brain tumor?
27,
You were 27. Oh my goodness. How old are you now?
37. I just had 10 years cancer free a few days ago.
Wow, wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You mentioned trying to deal with this pain, obviously through opioids again, through painkillers, and you were found by your mum in the car
Yeah.
with these drugs on your lap. Talk to me about that moment.
Yeah. So naturally, when I got into the treatment, my parents were helping me a lot. They had mentioned to the doctors that I was an opiate addict, right? So because they were concerned about me getting addicted again. I get it, but I was pissed off at the time, right? I was not happy. I was not happy because they would hold all my pill bottles like in her purse, and she would only give me these small little Vicodin every 4 to 6 hours, and I'm like, Mom, I used to take 30 of those things. Two of these things every 4 hours is not gonna do anything to me.
Well, this is really difficult because you're taking something away from an addict that feels that they need it, but also, Michael, you said yourself, you're comfortable in control. You know,
Yeah,
being a
yeah, yeah,
pitcher, you are in control, and at this point, you're not in
yeah.
control. You're not in control of
No,
much,
no, no,
right?
not at all. And I'm also in really intense pain. So I think a lot of my opiate use in the past was mental pain, not as much as the physical. Now I'm in all this physical pain, and I feel betrayed because I can't get the things that I needed. And I think that was part of my mindset where I reached out, instead to go find it on the street because I wasn't getting it here, and I needed something for something. I needed it.
Looking at all of the awful stuff that you went through with this brain cancer, you must have then looked at the fracture of your arm like, well, that was quite a small thing in comparison. But going through that horrible situation, being taken forced almost out of baseball, not really seeing a life for yourself or any hope outside of baseball. That took you a long time. And then the brain cancer. Were you already said about self-pity, but were you angry? Were you blaming? Who were you blaming? Who were you angry with? The world, God? How are your thought process?
Absolutely. I was mad at yes, mad at God. I was mad at the world. I was mad at baseball. And I think in that moment when I started to I learned how to meditate. After that limbo of agony, I learned how to meditate, and I learned how to start really healing my nerve damage. And I started to do an exercise program where I would really focus on my movements and being purposeful in my movements. And there's that mind body connection that happens, right? What happens, right? And so then as my movements and everything, I start to really think about them. Then I start to my thoughts become more purposeful, right? And so when my thoughts became more purposeful, I became willing to take suggestions, that I started to be honest with myself, because I was full of all that anger and blame, right? I was not only, yeah, I was not only mad at those things, but I was mad at my college coaches for overusing me. I was mad at the Red Sox for my arm, for ruining my arm, and for letting me go. I was mad at God for giving me a brain cancer. But the thing about that is I buried the truth, though, right? I buried the truth under so deep under layers of denial, right? Because blame is so much easier, right, than taking responsibility. It really is, and that's kind of what my disease looked like. Because the real truth is that all of those things that happened to me were my fault, right? I was the one that never communicated to my coaches that my arm was sore. I was just so eager to pitch all the time to make up for all the lost years, right? I was the one that went out and drank and abused my medication when I should have been focusing on my rehab with my arm. I was the one that ruined my arm, not the Red Sox, right? I was the one in my desperation to fix my arm that bought human growth hormone and other anabolic steroids from a shady source, and I used them without medical supervision, and that's most likely what gave me my brain tumor. So it wasn't God that gave me brain cancer; it was me. And I think when I came to that realization, I started to take personal responsibility for the past. And it doesn't mean that I accept those things, right? It means that doesn't mean I approve of those things. It means I accept them, right? Acceptance is not approval, right? And I don't keep the door on it, but I can learn. Then I can learn from it to do better in the future.
I loved it. I mean, this is a big, huge leap of mindset. On one side, you've got the blame game, you've got the self pity, you've got the victimization, you've got why me, why me, blame this person, blame that person, blame this situation, blame God, blame the world. And right across the fence, you've got accountability, you've got taking responsibility, you've got an understanding of yourself, controlling the controllables. How does one get from one side of the fence to the other? You mentioned meditation.
Yeah.
Meditation helped you. You mentioned the movement, the rehabilitation and movement therapy, and the mind body connection. This is so underspoken about. This is so underplayed, and it's so hugely important. What you're talking about, these two different mindsets. One stops you from moving on with your life, and one stops you from recovering, and the other literally moves you forward in a positive way and helps you recover. But to get from one to the other, some people never get there. Some people stay in this blame game. They stay in the victim state. It's a huge important jump that you've made, and you should be hugely proud of yourself for doing that. By the way,
Thank you. Which I appreciate that. Is what I say that the cancer was a gift, because it brought me into that moment in my life, right? It helped me find closure in baseball. So, but it brought me to that moment where when I said I had to die or do something different, right? Right. What's different from what I've been doing, right? The different thing that I'm doing is I have to accept my situation and I have to take ownership of it. Like this is, whatever bad thing that happened, because I hadn't come to accountability yet at this point. Whatever bad thing that happened, this is it. This is the truth. This is what I'm dealing with. So what are you going to do about it? So I slowly started to then I learned how to mindfulness and meditate, and it started by I went to see one of my doctors, and I was just so frustrated with all this stuff going on, and I was manic in a sense, and he suggested to me, you should download this meditation app. As like sarcastically, and I was like, maybe I will. I'll see. I became open to suggestions, and I did, and I started to learning how to meditate, and I really it really just it helped channel all of that stuff, and I learned how to sit in my pain, and I learned how to really sit in it, and learn to appreciate it, and see it in a different way. you know there's that pain pleasure like line. I'm never going to say I got to the point where I like people hitting me with a whip or anything. I don't like any I don't like any of my pain, right? But I learned to have a relationship with it, to feel it and to see it, and to really understand my body, and to really feel everything in it. It just gave me a new relationship with my body that I can then transfer into my mind. And it was a transformation that happened in that sense.
yeah, huge transformation, huge transformation. Meditation does give us that. It allows us to do that. I've never experienced the excruciating physical pain that you're talking about. And on a daily basis, I can't imagine how that is. It's really interesting for me to hear that you have to almost form a relationship with it. It's there, it's the reality of it. You're going through it, and the meditation allows you to form maybe more of a positive relationship with it, to step outside of yourself sometimes and see it from the outside in. And you also said something really important, which was you come to a realization that this is the reality of it. What am I going to do about it? Like, what is there to be done about it? I'm not going to sit on my ass blaming everyone and staying in this victim state. I'm going to move forward and try to do something about it. um that's again, it's powerful. It's taking back the ownership, it's taking back control of your life. It's not easy, it's not easy.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I think too, there's this notion, and I think this is the problem of like prescribing, opiates and amphetamines and all these other things that you see now, this prevalent now, is there's this notion that we have to always be 100%, right? We always have to be 100%, always have to be this. And that's what Adderall did for me. It always made me focus. It always made me 100%. And that's that's how I live my life. And now that I've learned to have this relationship, hey, sometimes I'm going to be 50%. Sometimes I'm going to be 80, and whatever, however it may look, and however I feel, doesn't mean I get to give up on the day. I got to show up and just try my best, right? And I think that once I got past that mindset.
Well, and a sport probably gives you that as well, because you're
Sure.
absolutely right. It doesn't matter whether you wake up one day and you're like 50%, 20%, 30%. Not every day you can be 100%. It's not possible, but still getting out of bed and still showing up and trying the best you can on that day is where the daily change happens. This is where the daily change happens, the personal development. It's really tough. It's really tough. There are days where you want to stay in bed, where you want to be in your self-pity. And this is not talking about rest as well. Rest
Yeah.
and recovery
Yeah.
is
Totally
also
different. Yeah.
totally different and very important. But this is about making sure that you are consistent and show up for yourself, even on the days where you only feel that your output is 50%. That's okay. We're human.
Yeah.
We can never be perfect every day, all the time. So I don't understand what this perfection, this striving for perfection is in us humans. I don't get it. Like,
Yeah. Well, on a side note to that too, there's also, I think we live in a society globally, like there's this promise of being pain free, right? Right. All these prescriptions and all these things, they promise us to eliminate our pain, right? And pain, I think, is something that we don't emphasize as much as that we're always going to be in some form of pain, and pain looks different for each and every one of us. It can be physical, you live in chronic pain, or it could be mental. You have depressions or these bad things, whatever it may be. Our pain, we all have it, we're all going to experience it. And I don't think that I think that the thought that we can eliminate all of it, I think that we can find purpose in it and meaning in it, and looking at it in a different way. And just to, once we acknowledge that it exists, then I'm not trying to always eliminating it. When I'm always trying to eliminate it, I'm in a victim mindset where I can't do anything about it because I need somebody else to come help me do something about it. But when I realize that, hey, it's going to be there, but I can manage it. I can
I can
minimize
manage
it.
it.
I can
I can
manage
manage
it.
it. And what can I do today to minimize it as well? Because you can always do something. Nothing is nothing, but something always moves to something else. Some of those things just for people to take away as well. So meditation, we've spoken about, and I've spoken about in other episodes as well, the importance of meditation. You know, to practice that takes some people easier than others. Some people find it more difficult to be still, to be calm, to actually meditate, to clear the mind, to do all of that stuff. But what I can say with that is practice makes perfect. The more you do, the better you get at it. And also with meditation, not to take meditation as this huge thing that you put pressure on yourself to do. Like, oh, I must spend half an hour in a quiet room and meditate. The smallest things can be meditative, and you can go into meditative state or flow state through small actions. And so I hope that everyone out there just explores their own way of meditating, because it's hugely helpful. Some of the other tools you've spoken about, this mind body connection, so important. Movement. We live in a world now where technology is, I think, restricting our movement so much more. People are going into offices, they're working from home. We're connecting now through technology from 2 different continents and 2 different time zones. It's an incredible thing, but it is isolating us and it is making us move less. movement is so important for our survival and for our development. So I want to talk about what you're doing now and get into that. Just before, can you talk to me a little bit about some of the movement practices that you were doing, some of the rehabilitation stuff? Were you seeing physiotherapy? Were you taking it upon yourself to find ways to move yourself? How did that look?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I took it upon myself. And so, like I was mentioning earlier, I had this it's your front shin muscle is called your anterior tibialis. And so it's that part of your toe that goes when you lift up to walk, right? And so that muscle there that lifts up my foot, it was completely numb, so I couldn't move it, right? So it made you don't realize how much you need that when you don't have it, you know? And so, right, and so when I was doing this meditation and I was really sending signals to my try to get feeling back in my toes, and it was incredibly painful, but it started to work. And then I would when I was started to exercise and I started to walk, I did slowly, like you said, even with meditation, you start slowly and build your way to it. I started to walk, and as I was walking, what I would do is I would visualize in my brain the actual movements of the toes, right? Gripping the ground, and pressing against the ground. And I would mimic the motions where I couldn't feel my shin, and I would mimic it as I'm walking and as I'm doing it, I'm also visualizing it in my brain. And
The
then it slowly starts.
visualization,
Yeah,
so important.
yeah. So then I started to do that in my run. I started to run a little bit and started to do that. And I started to do squats and other weight. And that's another thing that I gained from baseball, is having this, really a ton of knowledge in weight training, and especially how to. I got a lot of specialized training, so I knew a lot how to do it. And so then I started slowly to push it. I started to run a little bit. Then I found this, and I'm a little crazy. I'm not gonna lie, but I found this archaic jump rope in my parents' house that was made of leather, right? And so my feet were hypersensitive, right? So anytime I stubbed my toe, or even brushed like anything against it, it would hurt so bad. I mean, probably the worst feeling in the world. And it's still bad, but
I
nothing
mean,
like that.
most
So
people, when we stub our toe or something like that, it is excruciatingly painful.
oh
But for
yeah,
you,
yeah,
like, so sensitive. So,
yeah.
my goodness, I
Yeah,
can't imagine.
even if you flick my toe, or just even grab it, it hurts really bad. But even now, but so I would start, I would jump rope with that leather jump rope, and I can't tell you how many times I hit it. But you know what? That was some incentive to, like, not do it again.
Some
And so
Rocky Balboa stuff
yeah,
there,
yeah, 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 yeah,
right?
yeah, like on Timu Rocky Balboa, But
On TV, Rocky Balboa.
yeah,
Uh,
but no, I remember doing that in my backyard at my parents' house, and then I started to jump and do things, and then I started to, actually started to then add some more weights, and I started to build the stability and balance training program where to now I'm at a point now where I'm stronger and more stable than I was when I played. I can lift, even at my age now, and I can lift way more, and I still challenge myself every day. I do really unique and crazy stuff because I have all that knowledge that I gained, but I'm always challenging myself because, if I don't walk and I don't exercise, all that stuff will come back. It'll come back. It comes back. But if I'm consistent with it, I mean, plus I'm really superficial, so I care about how I look too, right? Right. But yeah, no. But at the same time is once
it's
I
about
stop
healthy
to,
living. It's about
yeah,
healthy living.
yeah, it is. So when I stop doing that type of training, and I start to get that numbness back, and I start to lose that spatial awareness. But when I continue my training and I progress and I progress on it, I get more and more and more back out of it. So
And you're talking about an experience that is so extreme that most people don't experience really. But we can compare that to our everyday lives of people that don't experience that. It's just, if we do nothing, we get worse. We get worse at life. If you're sitting around not moving, doing nothing, we get worse at life. We get fat, we get lazy in our minds, in our bodies, in our souls, in our spirit, in our beings. It's true. This is about encompassing everyday movement practices, healthy living, lifestyle choices, isn't it? You've got that in abundance, and you've got that motivation. And I think it's great to know that baseball gave you the grounding of knowledge to actually weight train, to move your body, and to do these exercises to improve yourself. But I think something else that it gave you as well, tell me if I'm wrong, is the visualization, right? Because the visualization is so important in sport. Again, I'm talk about dance. Dance is very close to sport. Athleticism, you have to visualize yourself doing a move, succeeding in that move in order to achieve it. And you took that lesson and applied it here in your recovery.
different domain in my life, right? That's, yeah, exactly, right. And so I think too, yeah, like you know this is, especially if you're going to do it in front of an audience or in front of people, you want to already have that played out in your mind before you go out on there. So so I can't tell you how many times that I did that with baseball and things now, and I do it in my speaking now. Right, I still use it. Right, when I speak in front of a big group or something, and I feel that excitement coming up. I need to slow myself down and put myself in that visualization. Right, so yeah,
Great. So
so
this is a perfect segue, Michael. This is a perfect segue. Tell me everything about what you're doing now. You're talking about public speaking. Tell me about
yeah,
it.
yeah. So I got when I was about a year, and I've been sober now 4.5 years. So I got completely sober. So when I got sober, thank you. I off all medications and everything. I've been sober off street drugs for like 7 or 8 years now, but I was on some medications for a while. But
But no
so
street drugs for 7 years, and actually
yeah,
no medication for 4 years
yeah,
as
four.
well.
No alcohol, nothing. Yeah, yeah,
Congratulations. It's
yeah.
so,
Thank
so
you.
incredible. Well
Thank you.
done.
So a couple years into it, my sobriety, or my first year of sobriety, I was back in school, and to finish my degree, I left early with baseball, and I got asked to speak at a treatment center, right? To share my experience, strength, and hope. Like it's very common in Alcoholics Anonymous and things, and so, but it was in front of like a couple hundred people, and I was at the time, I'm cocky, right? I'm like, I used to pitch in front of thousands of people. Like, this is going to be easy. I'll go up there and do it. So I walked up there with that same bravado that I had when I was coming out of the bullpen or coming into the game to pitch. And I got up there, and I always tell a story jokingly. I want to say, yes, a star was born, right after I was done, right? A star, but no, but no, like I was choked up. I couldn't talk, like, and you hear it in the way that I talk now too. That my cerebellum controls like how you process information too. So like when I get a little nervous or something, I talk a little faster than I can think, and I get a little bit excited, and that's I've learned how to adjust that now. But at the time, I didn't know that, right? I didn't, and so I went in there, it was raw, but during that experience, I wasn't great at it at all. But during that experience, when I was done, I just felt better. It's something so healing about sharing your deepest moments, or your dirty laundry in front of lots of people, and being vulnerable, right? And then I had people,
Being vulnerable and having a captive audience and allowing yourself to be vulnerable. Absolutely.
and then I had people come up to me after and told me how much they could relate to my story, and how much it inspired them, or whatever it may be. And like I said, that just made me feel so much better. And I thought, maybe all the things that I went through, that I'm able to share this in a way that I think could help people, but also at the same time help me. I was gonna say, what better way too that somebody like me can get paid to talk about himself, for so.
Oh, you've got an incredible story that is going to inspire a lot of people. So absolutely, you should get paid to speak, and you're a great speaker. I mean, like, not everyone can talk. Not everyone can talk even to somebody like me one to one, but let alone public speaking. It's a skill that a lot of people don't have. So I think there's something about fake it till you make it, about having self belief. I think there is a thin line between sort of arrogance and delusion and confidence, and I think as people we're always towing that line, and I think that's absolutely fine. I think having a little bit of delusion, a little bit of delusional self-belief, a little bit of overconfidence sometimes, and that whole fake it till you make it can do us a real good thing, as long as it doesn't go too far where it gets really like arrogant and completely like you're not on planet Earth anymore. Your feet are not, you're very humble, Michael. You're very humble is what I'm saying. You have that self-belief and that confidence that it's been in you. You mentioned it way back when we started this conversation, almost an hour ago, that you had that in you as a child, and you still have it now. I guess like walking out to your first public speaking gig,
Yeah,
that's back in you. That's part of you. That's
yeah,
your personality, and that's great. That's survival.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, my dogs are barking on you. Yeah,
Your dog's barking. I have
yeah, yeah.
I
Sorry
have
about that.
uh, a note down here to ask about your dog.
Yeah, yeah. What another great transition. Yeah, but just on a side note with that, I love the way that you put that, a little bit of it. And there's a part of my book that I write about, because when I got into when I had that moment where I learned that I wanted to speak, I went back to school for public speaking. I eventually got gave the commencement speech, and I started to really to practice my craft and get better at it, because it was something that challenged me. And one of the things that I missed most about playing was that challenge in front of lots of people. And speaking gives me that challenge, but I can also help people too at the same time. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. But then, but then I started to, see the motivational speakers and all these other people that when you do something new, you enter a new space, you want to see the people that are good at it, right? That's just a smart thing to do. And so I started to see these things, and you get your rah motivational speakers, and I was trying, I think at first to like, that's what I had to be in this field. And I just like stopped myself one day. I'm like, that's just, it's not you. Like you're not, you're trying to be somebody different again. I found myself in that familiar place where I'm trying to be somebody other than myself. Yeah, yeah. And I thought that, you know what, like you just said, like you just talked about a little bit, right? It's like, it's called like hormesis, right? Like I call it hormesis of the disease of me, right? A little bit of my disease, actually I gain from it. When I get too much, I lose from it. The balancing of diminishing returns, or whatever they call it. But if I have a little bit of it, I have a little bit of that jerk that's inside me, a little bit of that confidence, a little bit of that ego, then I'm actually who I am, because that's part of me. And so when I started doing that, then a shift happened in my speaking, where I'm not here to like be fancy and rah. I'm here to be real, and to talk to you, and to share my experience, and to connect. And
You
I had this.
found that sweet, amazing spot in life that we're all trying to find, where we have the confidence and the self-belief, and that, you said like a little bit of the jerkness, like I guess, you see yourself back then as a bit of a jerk. I call it like, it's the ego, isn't it? Essentially,
Yeah.
it's the ego. It's the ego that we are trying to rein in and control and utilize, and still be vulnerable and authentic and humble, but just have a little bit of that, which allows us to be the best version of ourselves. It's a balance, isn't it? You found the
Yeah.
balance. It sounds like
I'm finding the balance. Yeah.
finding. We all are.
Finding,
We
yeah,
all
yeah,
are
yeah,
daily,
yeah,
daily.
yeah. So, but no, I think I understand. At least I understand it, right? I understand it, and I know when I'm doing it wrong, and I know when I'm trying to be somebody different, and that's what this whole journey is, Dean. It's self discovery, right? It's self-discovery. I'm finding out who I am and getting comfortable with the flawed human being that I am, right? Because all those times in my life, I was always trying to be somebody different, and that's why baseball was never my destiny. I was trying to be somebody different, and I never knew who I was, because I was never willing to show up and face the hard times. I would rather just got high and forget about it and not deal with it, right? But when I start to do these things and face these hard times, and I learn a little bit more about myself, and I learned that, hey, you'll need to be this humble, like, I'm not like Job from the Bible, right, where everything bad happens to me and I still stay true, and I turn into this, saint. I'm not any of that, and that's okay. And that's okay. I am who I am, and when I learn who I am, and I accept that as the imperfect perfectionist, then I can in turn, the most important thing is I can accept you for you, and then I can live in a world that's beyond the scope of me. Because when I live in a world that's just me, the lens of me, everything falls apart. But when I can live outside that and see things outside that, then there's a chance to find some happiness.
Love that. I love that. That is so powerful. That is, again, shifting a lens, I think, on one side of the fence being completely selfish and self-centered, self, and then seeing you outside of yourself and seeing the wider community, the wider world, and being a little bit more selfless. And you've jumped that fence as well. I love that. You said that so beautifully. They gave you or suggested that you get a therapy dog. How did that come about? I love dogs, by the way. I'm such a dog person. I just heard your dog bark in the background, and I was like, I want to know all about your dog.
Those aren't the therapy dogs. Those are the German
Okay.
shepherds. Those are those
Oh,
are
German
those are
Shepherds
the
as
those
well.
those
Great.
are those are the protection. But yeah, so when I moved, after that, incident we were talking about earlier, where my mom found me, I was kind of stuck alone in Arizona by myself, because they after that they were fed up, so they all left. Rightfully so. This guy doesn't care. Why should we? And I think that was the right thing for them to do. But eventually I was just not able to take care of myself, and even after all that I put them through, my parents still let me move back to home with them in California. And my mom worked at the military base, where we lived. It's called the Defense Language Institute, where the soldiers learn foreign languages when they have to go overseas and things, right? So they know. And so uh they had recently adopted a dog there as a therapy dog for the soldiers, and they named him Lingo, after language, right? So that's his name. That's
Yes.
his name, Lingo. I like to take credit for it, but I didn't come up with it. But anyways, so typically when a facility or an organization adopts a dog, they assign him a handler, right? Somebody to bring him. The facility owns the dog, but it's somebody to bring to work every day, somebody to bring home to give that dog some consistency. And Lingo didn't have that. He was living on the barracks, and sometimes he'd be with soldiers, or sometimes people would take him home. It was just pretty inconsistent, and I think it was taking a toll on him. And my mom saw that, and she had a son at home that was hurting, and this dog here, and that we could maybe get together and bond. And so we immediately bonded, and he was the first good thing to happen to me. This was right after all these bad things have been happening to me. And he brought me into the present. And the present, I wasn't caught up in the past or worried about the future. I was present, and that is where I really changed. And he was a big turning point for me, because I knew in order to keep him, I had to get better. And this is right at that limbo of agony point. This is right. So this all came together, and Lingo just turned 10, same month as my brain tumor was removed. Right. So a God thing, right? He being brought into my life. And there's so
Oh,
many moments like that. And now, when he was able to officially retire, I promised that I would continue his work as a therapy dog to help others in the way that he helped me. And we are a big. He's pretty famous down at the university hospitals, the Rainbow Babies Children's Hospital, and the Cancer Center in Cleveland, Ohio. He's a big star down there.
oh, bless Lingo. You need to send me a picture and I'll make sure I put pictures of him up as well. And bless your mom for kind of, I guess, identifying that and bringing Lingo into your life. Dogs are so special, so special. And this dog in particular was kind of trained to be a therapy dog, and they're just so, the unconditional love you can't deny. And it sounds like Lingo gave you that purpose to get better for him, right? And so, like you said, live in the moment, live in the present. Love that. Oh my goodness, I love that. So we know you're a public speaker. We know you've trained, you've honed those skills, you've worked hard, you've looked at the landscape, and as you do as an athlete, you've worked hard, and you are undeniably an incredible public speaker. I already know that from speaking to you now. Any audience in front of you is going to be lucky to hear your story. You're so inspiring. Um, you mentioned a book though, so talk to me a little bit about this book that's on the horizon. Where are you in the writing
Yeah.
process?
Yeah, so I finished it last month. I finished like the writing of it, and naively, right? 'Cause that's the world I live in. I thought that, hey, once I write the book, I'm gonna be done. This is all the work's done. Here's the book. Somebody go publish it. But I've I've taken a break from editing, writing right now, and I just give myself a couple weeks. But I have an editors reading it and things reading on it right now, and I'm gonna have to rewrite a few parts that I think are gonna delay some of. I wanted it out by the end of the year, but I think it's gonna be a couple months after that. So it's in the editing process right now. I have a publisher I think that I'm gonna work with, and I'm gonna rewrite a few things, not much, but it's done. It's done. It just needs the finishing touches on
Well,
it.
this is
So
great. I mean, it's in a better state than most people out there
yeah,
have got books that never get written, never get finished. This is in a really good state. It's being edited. There's a couple of things that need rewriting, but you have got a publisher, and it's looking really positive to hit the shelves and actually be published and be out there. By the time this is released as well, it's going to be closer to the point where the book is there. The book, as you said, is called The Disease of Me. Is that
yeah,
correct?
yeah. It's the disease of me. How losing my professional baseball career, drug addiction, and brain cancer saved my life.
Amazing. Amazing. So it's some of the things that we've spoken about today, but of course the book is going to go into more detail about those situations so people can
Yeah,
understand. If anyone out there is loving Michael as much as I am, and the story that you've had is so inspiring, go and buy the book, and I'll make sure that I put the link in the show notes. So have a look there for sure. I'm looking forward to reading that myself, Michael.
yeah,
Looking back now, you've already mentioned a few of the lessons that you've learned along the way. I mean, you're so reflective. You've got a wise mind where you're looking back and you're reflective and you're taking so much accountability for the past. We already have spoken a little bit about what baseball gave you. We know that it was a really tough time, but actually it gave you so much positive stuff to actually get through these adverse
yeah.
effects. But looking back now, how has all of those situations made you great? Can you just reflect a little bit on that and talk a little bit about that? Whether it's the baseball injury, whether it's understanding how your identity was too encompassed in that, whether it's the
Yeah.
brain cancer, how are you standing in this world today so great because of those experiences?
Well, I think it's our failures, right? I think when you have the perspective of gratitude, I think the solution for me is when I manage my pain. when I take personal responsibility and when I work on my relationships, actively work on them with God and with other people, then I can have gratitude. And when I have gratitude, my perspective shifts, right? And then I can start to see things, like I said, from the past of all the things that I've gained. And I have some regrets looking back. I think the biggest and only regret that I have is all the people that I've hurt, right? My teammates and some relationships that I can't ever get back, but I can do better in the future and have living amends for the people that are around me, and it's how I be present every day for them and live in the moment, and what do I do about the gift that I've been given, the second chance at life. That I have to always remember that too. But there's some things, reflectively, and I think it's hard too for my parents that they had this son that had so much success, all at once and early at a young age. You had all these colleges sending me letters, and they had all these people not really having my best interest in heart, but they're always in their ears. So I think that with all that attention and all that, hey, your son's going to be this and he's going to be so great and all this. So I think they not turned a blind eye, but I think they became a little bit blind to my behavior patterns that were wrong. And yeah, and so I wish in a sense that I was forced to get like a summer job, or I had to like work on my hands instead of playing all those, years around it, or forced to like volunteer when I was younger to learn the power of service to somebody without any expectation of something in return, right? To learn it, to build relationships up outside of baseball. Because, and one thing I ask the kids when I speak to, or athletes now, is like, I want you to really visualize how many people are in your life right now. If your sport was gone, how many of them would still be around? Like, how many of them would you think would be around? Or how many, or better question, how many of them have you met through your sport? Right? How many, and some of those people will stick around. Some of them will, but the majority of them, the resources and all those things are going to be gone. And so I never thought about any of the life after that.
Yeah, it's just so important, the people around us are so important. And at the time where you're living it and you're breathing it and you're in that community of people, I guess that's all you see is this bubble, isn't it? That's your bubble of reality, and they're your everything. But once these little bubbles start to burst around you and you're left on your own and those people are no longer there for you, that's when you really start to see things the way they are. And that's when I guess it becomes tough. You question, relationships, the relationships are everything. And I really, your parents must have had a really tough time through. I think parenting in general is so
Oh
tough.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Every parent, right? Every parent. And I can think about my own parents and all they've been through as well. And I guess the point that we get to adulthood when we realize that our parents are not superhuman, they're actually just human, and
Yeah.
they're perfectly imperfect just like us, and they're just trying to deal with this shit every day. um it sounds like you've really understood that, and bless them as well, because they've stuck around and they've stuck by you. And
Yeah, they're my heroes. And what's great about this, the caveat of all of this, is that I have with my whole family, my sister and we have such an open relationship now because they know everything about it. So we don't walk on eggshells anymore. We can joke and laugh at each other. And it's we're still, there's still some things, but it's just we eat dinner 3 nights a week now together, basically all of us. So we get to spend all this time together. And even though I'm trying, I got all this other stuff going on with speaking and all this, I'm trying my best to be there as much as I can for them. So it's that's the blessing of it, because those were the real people that stuck with me the whole time, right? And I spent so much time suffering alone in a room, and part of that was my fault, so much time in isolation, and finally once I learned. And that's a big part of moving to Ohio. Once I learned the difference between isolation and solitude, once I learned how to be able to be okay to sit by myself, then I can really open up to others too. So,
yeah, that's so good. That's something that I've really been learning myself. I'm fine on my own. I'm fine in solitude. But there's a difference between solitude and isolation, isn't there? 'Cause you can isolate yourself and you can get very comfortable in that isolation and lonely, and I guess unsocial, unsocialize yourself in a really negative way. That's very different to actually sitting in solitude and being happy there. Um, yeah, that's powerful. I'm going through that myself as well, learning that. Yeah. There's I don't know whether you've heard of him, but obviously in the UK we have rugby. You
yeah,
guys American football, we have rugby. That's quite a big sport over here. Johnny Wilkinson was a huge star in the noughties, in the 2000s. He was like one of the biggest rugby stars, England player. He's such an inspiration. He does his own podcast. He's written books. He public speaks as well about his experience. I guess coming away from that sport, he says a quote that I wrote down. I read it and I wrote this down in preparation for talking to you today because I felt like it could match. And where we are now in our conversation, it really does. He says, "I am not a result of my past. My past is a result of who I am." Meaning the way I look back at my used to be can change based on where I am today. Because you were taking so much responsibility and so much accountability, right? You know, life didn't happen to me. It happened because of me. It happened in spite of me. I was the cause and you were taking so much accountability for that. I just read that and just thought he's kind of saying the same thing there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, what it does is it makes you realize, and I come into this in so many times while I was writing or when I talk to other people, we are so much more similar than we realize. All of us are so much more similar, and I think we get caught up sometimes in looking at the differences, and I always did that too. And I think when I'm open to people and I be of service and I see like our pain is the same, it really is. It may be a little bit different. We may have our own idiosyncrasies or whatever it may be, but it's the same. We interpret it the same, and I think that's an important message.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You have been so honest, so open, and so inspiring, really, telling your story for me today to me today. I really know that it's going to help a lot of people. I know that a lot of people are going to listen to this and be inspired by it. So I want to thank you so much for showing up and giving me your time, for sure. Is there anything else that you want to say, any stone that's left unturned or anything that you want to leave the listeners with? You don't have to. I'm putting you on the spot here now. You've said a lot, but just to give opportunity, if there's anything else that you want to say that you haven't.
No, I think just for the most part, I think what I've learned the most out of all of this is, that my self-worth or how I feel about myself has to come from within, right? It can't be from without. And I think in the me-centric society that we live in, where we get our validation from likes and all these other things, I think that no matter what, it has to come from me, and I have to risk being myself at the risk of your approval, right? I have to be myself. And so I think that's the main thing that I've learned. And yeah, too. And if you want to, talk to me or sign up for my email list or hear more about me, I give some updates on there. My website is www.michaelbugary.com, and I'm sure you'll post that for me. Yeah.
Absolutely. michaelbugary.com. It will be linked in the show notes for sure for everyone to go and do that. And as well as all of your social media handles and links as well. You're on Instagram, right? Do you just want to say your handle?
Yeah. My first initial, my last name, M Bugary. And then Facebook, yeah, just Michael Bugary. Yeah.
Wonderful. Go and follow Michael. Go and follow all of your. I'm really looking forward to seeing what's next for you. I think the sky's the limit, my friend, and I can't wait for this book to come out. I want to be one of the first to read it as soon as it's out.
Yeah.
You make sure you message me because I'm going to be reading that. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Dean. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Michael. Oh, Michael Bugary. What an absolutely inspirational guy. Honestly, I have to say, guys, this is one of my absolute favorite interviews that I've done since I started this podcast. And as I was listening back myself, I was questioning why I was so moved and touched by Michael's story. And I think it just comes down to simply Michael's authenticity. He is not afraid to be vulnerable. He is so open, so honest. I mean, this was an absolute masterclass in taking accountability. This is an absolute masterclass in taking responsibility for your own actions. This is an absolute masterclass in being so authentic, so vulnerable, so open that it really does connect. And you don't need to have been a professional athlete or even a drug addict or have had any form of cancer, let alone a brain tumor, to connect with Michael's story. I think he is just so authentic on a human level, and it was just so relatable. So Michael, thank you. Thank you so much for being so open, so honest. Thank you for talking about your story. And as you know, Michael does continue to talk about his story and his incredible transformation. He does this a lot through public speaking, inspiring people. And you can find out more on his website, which is obviously in the show notes. So please go and check him out, follow him on social media. And from there, you can also join the waiting list for his incredible book, the disease of me. I can't wait for that to come out, Michael. I'll be one of your first readers for sure. Hey, my lovely listeners, are you still with me? If you are, I just want to send you lots of love and gratitude. I truly appreciate your support. I truly appreciate you listening and staying with me. We're almost at the end of season 2 now, and I love seeing that you're all listening and enjoying these stories of inspiration, of self-development, personal development, of change, of transformation. However, I would love to hear you silent people out there who listen and don't say anything, whether that is commenting on an episode, whether that is engaging with me in my socials, whether that is leaving a star rating on the podcast wherever you're listening. However you want to do it, I would love to hear from you. And remember to engage with the podcast wherever you're listening. It really does help us reach more people and also continue to grow. That's all I got to say on that matter. Until next time, stay safe, stay fabulous as ever, and I'll see you very soon on another episode. Take care.